Captain Tejo stood at the big window of his spaceship and looked at the blue planet floating in the dark. Space before him, Earth was beautiful, just like the old pictures he had seen in the galactic history books, but something felt wrong about it. The planet looked too quiet, too peaceful, like it was sleeping, but not the good kind of sleep. His ship, the Harmony, was one of the best ships in the Galactic Council fleet, but right now it felt very small compared to the mystery that Earth had become. 250 years ago, humans had just stopped talking to the galaxy. No goodbye messages, no explanations, they just went quiet like someone had turned off a switch. Lieutenant So Young was working at her station, her fingers moving fast over the control buttons. She was the best sensor officer in the fleet, but even she looked confused by what she was seeing. "Sir," she said without looking up from her screen, "I am getting very strange readings from the planet. These numbers do not match anything we have in our computer system." Steho walked over to look at her screen. The energy readings were impossible, according to everything they knew about science. Numbers that big should have torn the planet apart, but Earth was still... They're still spinning like nothing was wrong. What kind of energy is it? So Young shook her head. "I do not know, sir. It is like nothing I have ever seen before. It is not fusion power or antimatter or even quantum energy. It is something completely different, something that should not exist. The reason they were here was because strange things had been happening in this part of the galaxy. Pirates who had been terrorizing trade ships for years had suddenly vanished without a trace. Merchant captains reported finding their usual routes completely clear of space junk and debris, like someone had cleaned up the entire solar system. Trade stations that had been abandoned for decades were suddenly working again with no explanation of who had fixed them. Mensign Hyun Woo was the youngest member of the crew, but he was very good with communication systems. "Captain," he called out, "I'm trying to contact the planet, but something is blocking our signals. It is like there is a wall around Earth that our messages cannot get through. Try harder." Tejo ordered. "We need to know what happened to the humans." The Galactic Council was very worried about Earth because humans had been weak when they last made contact. They could barely defend their own planet, let alone do anything that might affect other star systems, but all the evidence pointed to humans being involved in the strange event. Wu worked for several minutes trying different frequencies and signal types. Suddenly, his face changed and he looked up with wide eyes. "Sir, I got through. Someone is answering us and they knew we were coming." The main screen at the front of the bridge lit up, showing a human face. The man looked young, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. He was smiling, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you were in danger, even though you could not say, "Way greetings, Captain Tejo of the Galactic Council." "Ship Harmony," the human said in perfect galactic standard language. "I am Commander Ji-woo of the Earth Defense Force. Welcome to our solar system. We have been waiting for you." Tejo felt his blood turn cold. How did this human know his name? How did he know the name of his ship? The humans had been cut off from galactic communication for 2.5 centuries. They should not know about current ship designs or military protocols or even what language the Council was using these days. "Commander Ji-woo," Tejo replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "The Galactic Council is happy to talk to Earth again. We had lost contact with your people and we were worried about what happened to you." Ji-woo smiled wider and Tejo noticed that his teeth were very white and very sharp. "Oh, we know exactly what happened, Captain. We have been watching the galaxy very carefully for all these years. We have been learning and growing and preparing for this moment." Before Tejo could ask what he meant, So Young made a sound like she was scared. "Captain," she said in a shaky voice, "multiple ships are coming toward us from behind the moon. They are moving faster than anything I have ever seen on my sensors." The main screen split to show space around them, and Tejo saw something that made his heart skip. Ships were appearing from the shadow of the moon, but they were not like any ships he had ever seen. They were smooth and curved, like they had been grown instead of built, and they moved through space like fish swimming through water. In just a few seconds, they had surrounded the Harmony completely. "Those are pretty ships, are they not?" Tu said, like he was talking about the weather. 250 years is a long time, Captain, a long time to think about things, a long time to figure out better ways to do things, a long time to become something more than what you used to be. "What do you want from us?" Tejo asked, and he was surprised to hear that his voice was shaking. He had fought in 3 different wars and commanded ships in some of the most dangerous parts of the galaxy, but he had never felt fear like this before. Want Jiwoo laughed, and the sound made everyone on the bridge step back even though he was just on a screen. Captain, we do not want anything from you. We want to give you something. We want to give the entire galaxy a gift. The gift of seeing what humans become when they are left alone for long enough. The screen went black and suddenly the bridge was very quiet. Taeho could hear his crew breathing and the soft hum of the ship systems, but nothing else outside the window. The strange human ships stayed perfectly still around them like they were waiting for something. Sir So Young whispered, "Should we try to run?" Taeho looked at the ships surrounding them, ships that had moved faster than anything in the galactic fleet. Ships that had appeared without any warning from sensors that should have detected them light years away, ships that belonged to humans who had been weak and helpless the last time anyone had seen them. "No," he said quietly, "I do not think running would help us right now." The human ships did not move closer, but they did not move away either. They just stayed there like hunters who had caught something and were deciding what to do with it. And on Earth, the blue planet that had been silent for 250 years, something was stirring. Something that had been sleeping was waking up, and the galaxy was about to find out what humans had become. While no one was watching, the waiting began. 3 days had passed since the first contact, and Captain Taeho could not sleep. The human ships remained perfectly still around the Harmony, like metal guardians waiting for something to happen. His crew was getting more nervous with each passing hour, and he could see the fear growing in their eyes every time they looked at the impossible vessels surrounding them. Lieutenant So Young had not left her station except to eat and sleep for a few hours. She was the best sensor operator in the Galactic Council fleet, but the readings from Earth were making her question everything she knew about science and technology. "Captain," she said without looking up from her screen, "I have been analyzing the debris field around Mars, and what I found does not make sense." Taeho walked over to her station and looked at the data displayed on her screen. The computer was showing thousands of small pieces floating in space around the red planet, but these were not natural asteroids or space rocks. "What are they?" he asked. "Ship fragments, or thousands of them," So Young replied, touching the screen to zoom in on the debris. Each piece shows damage from different types of weapons. Zephyrian plasma burns, Vorthan ice blasters, Nexus Empire quantum damage, even some pieces that look like they were hit by weapons we do not have in our database. The captain felt his mouth go dry. The Nexus Empire was the most feared military force in the galaxy, and their quantum weapons could destroy entire moons. If there were pieces of ships destroyed by Nexus weapons floating around Mars, that meant someone had fought them here in this solar system. And how many ships do you think were destroyed here? Taeho asked. Based on the amount of debris, sir, I estimate at least 300 different vessels, maybe more. So Young looked up at him with worried eyes. "Captain, some of these fragments are from very recent battles. The metal is still warm from weapon impacts." Before Taeho could respond, Ensign Han-woo called out from his communication station, "Sir, we are receiving another transmission from Earth. This time it is a different person." Main screen flickered to life, showing a human woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to look right through him. She was wearing a uniform that appeared to be made of flowing liquid metal, and when she moved it rippled like water. Her smile was even more unsettling than Commander Jiwoo had been. "Captain Taeho," she said in a voice that was calm, but somehow made him want to run away. "I'm Admiral Yoonji of the Earth Defense Force. I apologize for keeping you waiting. We were finishing some cleanup work in our solar system." "Cleanup work?" Taeho repeated. "What kind of cleanup work?" The woman smiled wider, showing teeth that were too white and too sharp. "The last group of pirates who thought our system was undefended, the Crimson Fleet, made that mistake about 6 months ago. Before them, it was a Nexus Empire scouting force looking for easy targets. Before that, it was slavers from the Outer Rim who wanted to capture humans to sell in the slave markets." Lieutenant So Young made a small gasping sound and pointed at her instruments. "Captain, the energy readings from Earth just increased by 500%. Something big is happening down there." The view screen changed to show Earth from space, and what Taeho saw made his brain hurt trying to process it. The planet looked completely different than any world he had ever seen before. Whole Continents had been reshaped and rebuilt, giant structures that defied physics stretched from the surface into space, but they were not like the space elevators that other civilizations built. These structures seemed to be alive, pulsing with energy, and growing even as he watched. Cities floated in the atmosphere, held up by streams of controlled power that moved like blood through veins. The oceans glowed with soft blue light, and he could see massive underwater complexes that had not existed in any of the old galactic records about Earth. Magnificent, is it not? Admiral Yunji said, like she was showing off her garden. This is what happens when a species has time to evolve without interference, when they are forced to rely entirely on their own creativity and determination. What did you do? Teho whispered, staring at the impossible planet. We grew up, the Admiral replied simply. We realized that the galaxy saw humans as weak because we were weak, so we decided to stop being weak. We stopped depending on alien technology and alien solutions. We stopped trying to copy what other species had done and started creating our own path. The screen showed even more incredible sights. Ships the size of cities were being constructed in orbit around Earth, but they were not being assembled from parts like normal spacecraft. Instead, they seemed to be growing like living organisms. Humans in advanced environmental suits were working in the vacuum of space as easily as if they were walking on solid ground. For 250 years, we listened to every communication broadcast in the galaxy. Admiral Yunji continued. We heard about the wars and conquests and the endless cycle of species rising and falling and destroying each other. We decided we would not become part of that pattern. We decided we would become something entirely new. What are you now? Teho asked, and his voice came out as barely more than a whisper. We are what humans become when they stop pretending to be anything other than humans, she replied. We are the children of a world that taught us to survive anything that was thrown at us. And now, Captain, we are ready to teach the galaxy what we have learned during our long silence. The view screen showed more impossible technology, massive rings of energy surrounding Earth that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. Weapons platforms that looked like they were made of crystallized starlight, defense systems that bent space itself to protect the planet. But the most frightening thing was not the technology, it was the humans themselves. In the brief glimpses Teho caught of them, they moved with perfect coordination, like they were all connected by invisible threads. They worked together in ways that seemed almost supernatural, as if they could read each other's minds. We have been very patient, Admiral, Yunji said, but her voice was getting harder like metal. We have watched species destroy each other over resources that could easily be shared. We have seen civilizations wiped out because someone wanted their territory. We have observed the strong crushing the weak, simply because they could. The woman paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 2.5 centuries of human anger. The galaxy has had thousands of years to learn how to live in peace. It has chosen violence instead, so now it will learn a different way, our way. What do you mean? Teho asked, though he was terrified of the answer. You will see very soon, Captain, she replied. The first lesson begins now. The screen went dark, but this time Teho knew that the silence was not empty. It was full of potential, like the moment before lightning strikes. He looked out at the human ships surrounding his vessel and realized that they were not just advanced technology. They were the tools of a species that had spent 2.5 centuries preparing for this moment. Earth continued to spin below them, but now it was glowing with power that made nearby stars look dim by comparison, and somewhere in the darkness of space, he could sense other human ships moving closer, bringing with them changes that would shake the foundation of galactic civilization. The revelation was complete. Humanity was no longer the weak species that had been forgotten by the galaxy. They had become something far more dangerous. They had become teachers, and their first lesson was about to begin. Admiral Yunji appeared on the screen again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her, Captain Teho could see other humans working at stations that seemed to be made of pure energy. Their hands moved through glowing displays that responded to their touch like the light itself was alive and intelligent. Observe, Captain, she said, and her voice carried a tone that made everyone on the bridge step back from their stations. The human ships that had been perfectly still around the Harmony for 3 days suddenly began to move, but not in any way that made sense according to everything Teho knew about physics. They did not fire engines or activate thrusters, instead they seemed to push against the fabric of space itself, making reality bend and twist around them like soft clay. Lieutenant So Young was staring at her sensor readings with her mouth hanging open. "Sir," she said in a voice filled with terror, "they are creating some kind of tunnel through space itself. This is not hyperspace travel or any kind of faster than light drive we know about. This is something completely different." As they watched, one of the human ships simply ceased to exist. It did not explode or fade away or disappear in a flash of light. It just stopped being there, as if it had never been real in the first place. Then only seconds later, it reappeared near a notorious pirate stronghold that was located 3 light years away from Earth. Through their long-range sensors, they could see the massive pirate fortress that had been terrorizing merchant vessels for over 30 years. It was built into a large asteroid and protected by enough weapons to destroy a small planetary defense fleet. The fortress had been considered impregnable by every military force in the galaxy, but as Tejo watched in amazement, all the lights on the pirate base went out one by one. The weapon system stopped working. The docked ships became completely motionless, as if someone had simply turned off a power switch. The entire fortress that had been a symbol of fear and violence for decades was now as quiet as a tomb. "What did you do to them?" Tejo asked. "We offered them a choice, Commander." Jiwoo's voice came through the communication system. "They could surrender peacefully and face justice for their crimes, or they could resist and face the consequences of their actions. They chose surrender. It was the intelligent decision." The human ship that had somehow traveled 3 light years in the space of a few heartbeats returned to Earth, bringing with it one of the captured pirate vessels. Through the transparent sections of the ship, Tejo could see the pirates inside. They were alive and appeared to be unharmed, but their faces showed a kind of terror that he had never seen before, as if they had witnessed something that had broken their understanding of reality. "The Nexus Empire has been expanding aggressively into this sector of the galaxy," Admiral Yunji said, and now her voice became as hard as forged steel. "They have destroyed 17 different civilizations in the past 50 years, turning entire worlds into lifeless rocks. We have decided that this behavior will stop." The main view screen shifted to show the edge of the solar system, and Tejo felt his heart stop beating. A massive Nexus Empire fleet was approaching, consisting of hundreds of warships, each one capable of reducing entire continents to ash. The Nexus Empire was universally feared throughout the galaxy, and their military had never been defeated in battle. "Admiral," he said urgently, trying to keep the panic out of his voice, "you must evacuate your people immediately. That fleet has enough firepower to destroy this entire solar system. Your technology may be advanced, but the Nexus Empire has weapons that can crack planets in half." "Is that so?" she replied, and there was something in her tone that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up from the surface of Earth. Something began to rise into space. It was not a ship or a space station, but something that hurt to look at directly. The structure seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its surface flowing like liquid mercury, but appearing harder than diamond. As it ascended, space itself began to warp and bend around it, like the universe was being reshaped by its presence. The Nexus Empire fleet detected the approaching object and responded exactly as they always did. They opened fire with overwhelming force. Their quantum torpedoes, antimatter cannons, and gravitational disruptors unleashed enough destructive energy to vaporize small moons and tear holes in the fabric of space time itself. The weapons struck the human construct, and something impossible happened. The massive amounts of destructive energy simply stopped existing for a moment before being absorbed by the strange flowing surface of the structure. Then that same energy was converted into something else and redirected back at the attackers with perfect precision and devastating effect. One by one, the mighty ships of the Nexus Empire fleet went completely dark, not destroyed, not damaged, but utterly powerless. Their weapon systems shut down, their engines stopped working, their shields collapsed, everything that made them dangerous simply stopped functioning. Through the open communication channels, Tejo could hear Nexus Empire commanders screaming orders at their crews and demanding explanations for what was happening, but their ships would not respond to any commands. The vessels were completely dead in space except for life support systems, which continued to work perfectly, Captain. So Young reported with wonder in her voice. The Nexus Empire crews are all alive and unharmed, but every single offensive and propulsion system on their ships has been completely disabled. The human structure that had effortlessly defeated the most feared military force in the galaxy began to change shape, becoming larger and more complex. Parts of it seemed to exist in normal space, while other sections flickered in and out of reality as if they were visiting from some other dimension entirely. This is merely the beginning, Admiral Yunji said, and her voice was soft but somehow more frightening than if she had been shouting for far too long. This galaxy has been ruled by violence and fear. Those days are ending today. What are you going to do with the Nexus Empire fleet? Teho asked, pointing at the hundreds of disabled warships. We are going to teach them. She replied, just as we taught the pirates, just as we will teach everyone else who believes that might makes right. The galaxy is about to learn that there is a better way to live. The view screen showed Earth again, but now the planet was surrounded by a growing collection of captured vessels from dozens of different species and factions: pirates, slavers, raiders, military scouts, and now the pride of the Nexus Empire fleet, all of them floating helplessly around the world that had been silent and forgotten for 250 years. Captain Teho realized with growing horror that everything he thought he knew about galactic power was completely wrong. The humans had not just survived their long isolation, they had used those centuries to become something that could casually defeat the strongest military forces in known space, and they were just getting started. The demonstration was over, but the real lesson was about to begin, and that lesson would change everything in the galaxy forever. The news of what happened to the Nexus Empire fleet spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. Within hours, every government, every military organization, every trading corporation was desperately trying to understand what had occurred in the Sol system. Captain Teho found himself at the very center of the greatest crisis in recorded galactic history. The Galactic Council called an emergency session on the capital world of Centauri Prime, and Teho was ordered to report immediately everything he had witnessed. He stood in the massive council chamber, facing representatives from 847 different species. All of them wanted answers to questions that he was not sure anyone could answer. Chancellor Morvan, the ancient blue-skinned leader of the Galactic Council, demanded immediate explanations. Tell us everything, Captain. What exactly are we dealing with in the Sol system? Teho looked around the chamber at faces that showed every emotion, from fear to confusion to outright rage. The humans have evolved far beyond anything we previously understood, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Their technology operates according to principles that our best scientists cannot explain. They can manipulate space and time itself, absorb any form of attack, and move through dimensions that we cannot even detect. This is impossible, shouted General Vex Thor of the Wardonian Empire, his red eyes blazing with fury. No single species could develop such advanced capabilities in only 250 years of isolation. They had no choice, Teho replied. They were completely cut off from galactic civilization. They had to learn to survive entirely on their own resources or face extinction. And they chose to survive by becoming something entirely new. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was making careful preparations for what they knew was coming deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that other species could not perceive. Director Minho was meeting with the most important leaders of the Earth Defense Force. The galaxy knows about us now, he said to the group of people sitting around a conference table that appeared to be made of crystallized light. Some civilizations will try to understand what we have become. Others will try to destroy us before we can change the balance of power. We must be prepared for both reactions. Around the table sat the greatest minds that humanity had ever produced. Dr. Hyjin, who had unlocked the fundamental secrets of dimensional manipulation; Colonel Dong Hyan, who had designed the defense systems that made Earth completely invulnerable to attack; Intelligence Chief Yujin, who monitored every communication in the galaxy before most governments even knew those messages existed. Our surveillance networks report that 17 different species are already mobilizing military fleets to attack us, Yujin said, activating a holographic display that showed ship movements throughout the galaxy. The Vorthan Collective, the Crimson Syndicate, even the normally peaceful Ethereal Union They are all terrified of what we represent to their established order. Excellent, Minho replied with satisfaction. Fear will make them cautious, and careful enemies make fewer tactical mistakes. We need them to understand that we are not like any species they have encountered or conquered. The 4DR Hyjin manipulated the holographic display to show the complex web of political relationships that controlled galactic civilization. The power structures that have dominated everything for thousands of years are already beginning to collapse. She observed just the knowledge that we exist threatens the fundamental beliefs that these civilizations have about how the universe operates. Then we will give them new beliefs, Minho said firmly. Something far better than the endless cycles of conquest and subjugation that they have always accepted as natural across the galaxy. The effects of humanity emergence continued to spread in ways that no one had anticipated. Trade routes that had been controlled through military force for centuries suddenly found themselves protected by invisible guardians. Merchant vessels that had paid tribute to pirates for generations now traveled safely through regions of space that had been dangerous for thousands of years. Pirate fleets that had terrorized entire star systems for decades simply disappeared without explanation. Their crews were discovered alive, but thoroughly defeated on remote prison worlds with no memory of how they had been transported there. The message was becoming clear to everyone who was paying attention. On the war-torn planet of Zarian, where two different species had been engaged in brutal combat for over 300 years, something unprecedented happened. All the weapons on both sides suddenly stopped functioning. Soldiers found their rifles empty, their tanks powerless, their aircraft unable to leave the ground. A voice spoke from the sky in both languages simultaneously. The fighting ends immediately. This world will know peace whether you choose it or not. Similar events began occurring on dozens of planets throughout the galaxy. Ancient conflicts that had seemed impossible to resolve simply ended when the tools of war became useless. Slave markets found their security systems malfunctioning and their prisoners mysteriously freed. Corrupt governments discovered that their communication networks were broadcasting the truth about their crimes to their own populations. The galaxy was experiencing a massive awakening to a completely new reality. Humanity was no longer content to remain isolated and uninvolved. They had become active participants in galactic affairs, and their participation was fundamentally changing everything that had seemed permanent and unchangeable. In the Great Council chamber on Centauri Prime, the debates continued, but now they were focused on survival rather than conquest. Species that had been bitter enemies for millennia began working together, trying to understand this new threat that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. Some of the wiser council members began to suggest that perhaps the humans were not trying to conquer the galaxy in the traditional sense. Perhaps they were attempting to save galactic civilization from destroying itself, but old habits and ancient fears die very hard, and many species still believed that the only way to deal with a superior power was to eliminate it before it could eliminate them. The Galactic Council voted to send diplomatic missions to dozens of species, urging them to avoid any aggressive actions against Earth while they tried to understand humanity's true intentions. But fear and pride are powerful motivators, and not everyone was willing to listen to reason. Military commanders across the galaxy began forming secret alliances and planning joint operations against the human threat. They told themselves that they were acting to preserve freedom and independence, but deep down many of them knew they were simply afraid of becoming irrelevant in a universe where violence was no longer the ultimate arbiter of disputes. The galaxy held its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would the humans use their incredible power to establish themselves as the new dominant force? Would they try to rule over everyone else through superior technology and abilities, or would they attempt to create something entirely different, something better than anything the galaxy had ever experienced? The answer was coming very soon, and it would determine the fate of countless worlds and billions of lives. The age of change had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first real test of humanity's new position in galactic affairs came from the most unexpected source possible. The Corvani Republic was not one of the major galactic powers, but they had built their entire civilization on the principle that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. They were aggressive, militaristic, and completely convinced that any problem could be solved by applying enough violence. Supreme Commander Kovacs was the perfect example of Corvani leadership. He was massive, muscular, and absolutely certain that the humans were using some kind of elaborate trick to make themselves appear more powerful than they actually were. He studied the reports about Earth and decided that humanity was just using advanced illusions and propaganda to fool the galaxy. Let these pathetic humans try to stop us, he declared to his assembled fleet commanders as they prepared for their next conquest. We will show the entire galaxy that these Earth creatures are nothing but cowards hiding behind fancy light shows. The target they had chosen was the Deltan system, a collection of 5 peaceful worlds, inhabited by a gentle species that had never harmed anyone in their entire recorded history. The Deltans were farmers and artists who spent their time growing beautiful crops and creating works of art that were treasured throughout the galaxy. The Deltans looked like tall, graceful humans with silver skin and large, expressive eyes. They had never developed military technology because they had never needed it. Their worlds were so peaceful and their people so kind that even the most aggressive species had traditionally left them alone. But the Corvani were not interested in tradition or kindness. They wanted the rich agricultural worlds that the Deltans had cultivated for thousands of years, and they planned to take them by force. The Deltan people would be sold as slaves in the outer rim markets, where their gentle nature would make them valuable as servants. The Corvani fleet consisted of 100 heavily armed warships, each one carrying enough firepower to level entire cities. They dropped out of hyperspace near Deltan Prime, the main world of the system, and immediately began their assault. The attack was timed to begin at sunrise, just as the Deltan farmers were starting their daily work in the fields. The Corvani ships entered the atmosphere with their weapons charging for a devastating orbital bombardment that would destroy the major population centers and leave the survivors too shocked and terrified to resist. The Deltans on the surface could only watch in horror as death descended from the sky above them. They had heard stories about the mysterious humans and their incredible power, but Earth was many light years away, and help could not possibly arrive in time to save them. They prepared to die with the same quiet dignity that had characterized their entire civilization. Then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, everything changed in a way that defied all understanding. The Corvani warships simply stopped moving. They hung motionless in the air like insects trapped in invisible amber. Their weapons were fully charged and ready to fire, but the ships themselves could not move, could not turn, could not do anything except remain perfectly still in the sky. "This is Commander Sung-min of the Earth Defense Force," came a voice that was broadcast simultaneously on every communication frequency. "In the system, the Corvani fleet has committed an act of unprovoked aggression against a peaceful civilization. This behavior will not be tolerated under any circumstances." A single human vessel materialized in the center of the system, appearing out of nothing like a dream becoming reality. It was breathtakingly beautiful in a way that was almost painful to observe. The ship seemed to have been grown rather than constructed, and its hull rippled with colors that existed beyond the normal spectrum of light. "Withdraw from this system immediately and surrender your weapons." Commander Sung-min continued, his voice carrying absolute authority. "This is the only warning you will receive, Supreme." Commander Kovacs was so enraged by this interference that his green skin turned dark purple with fury. He screamed orders at his fleet to attack the single human ship with everything they had. Every weapon system in the Corvani arsenal opened fire simultaneously. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, gravitational disruptors, and experimental energy weapons all unleashed their devastating power at the lone Earth vessel. The massive barrage of destruction never reached its target. The energy simply vanished as if it had never existed, absorbed by the human ship hull and converted into something else entirely. When the bombardment finally ended, the Earth vessel was not only completely undamaged, but seemed to have grown brighter and more beautiful than before. "You have made your choice," Commander Sung-min said, and there was genuine sadness in his voice. "Now you will learn the consequences." What happened next became a legend that would be told throughout the galaxy for thousands of years to come. The human ship did not fire weapons or launch an attack. Instead, it simply became more real, more present in a way that bent the fabric of reality around it. Suddenly, the entire Corvani fleet found themselves transported to a place that looked like normal space but felt fundamentally wrong. Time moved differently in this pocket dimension, and what seemed like years passed while the Corvani crews experienced something that would change them forever. They lived through the terror and pain of every single victim they had ever hurt during their careers of conquest and violence. They felt the agony of families torn apart by their wars. They experienced the desperation of children watching their parents die. They understood for the first time in their lives the true cost of the suffering they had inflicted. When the experience finally ended, and they were returned to normal space, only a few minutes had passed in the real universe, but the Corvani fleet had been transformed at the most fundamental level. They no longer wanted to hurt anyone. They no longer believed that violence was the answer to any problem. The Corvani ships left the Gelton system immediately, but they did not return home to prepare for more conquests. Instead, they went to worlds they had previously attacked and began the long process of rebuilding what they had destroyed. They became peacekeepers and protectors instead of raiders and conquerors. This is the choice we offer to every species in the galaxy, Admiral Yunji announced in a message that was broadcast to every inhabited world. Transform yourselves voluntarily or be transformed by forces beyond your control. The age of conquest and violence is ending today. The age of cooperation and mutual respect begins now. The message was crystal clear to anyone who was paying attention. Humanity would not tolerate aggression against innocent people anywhere in the galaxy, but they would not simply destroy the aggressors as other powerful species might have done. Instead, they would change them, remake them into something better. Whether they wanted to change or not, the galaxy began to understand that the humans were not conquerors in any traditional sense. They were teachers of the most profound kind, and their lessons had the power to reshape the very nature of galactic civilization. 1 full year had passed since Captain Tejo first encountered the human fleet near Earth, and the galaxy had become completely unrecognizable. The great military powers that had dominated space for thousands of years found themselves completely obsolete. Overnight wars that had raged for centuries simply ended as humanity influence spread to every corner of known space, like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. But it was not conquest in the way that other species understood the concept. The humans did not invade planets or establish military governors or demand tribute from conquered worlds. They simply existed, and their very presence changed everything around them in ways that seemed almost magical. Captain Tejo now served as the primary liaison between the Galactic Council and Earth, representing both organizations in the new relationship that was forming between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. He stood in the observation deck of Harmony Station, a magnificent new facility that orbited Earth and served as a meeting place for representatives from every known species. Through the enormous transparent wall, he could see the planet below, and it had been transformed into something that looked like a living work of art. The surface glowed with soft light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Cities floated gracefully in the atmosphere, connected by streams of controlled energy that flowed like rivers of light. It seems impossible that only 1 year has passed, said Dr. Haijin as she joined him at the observation window. She had become one of the most important figures in galactic politics, helping to translate human concepts and technology into forms that other species could understand. And except your people have given us something that we never had before, Tejo replied, watching ships from dozens of different civilizations arrive and depart from the orbital stations surrounding Earth for the first time in recorded galactic history. We have genuine peace, not peace. Dr. Haijin corrected him gently. Peace is simply the absence of war. What we have achieved is something far more valuable. We have harmony, different species working together toward common goals instead of fighting over limited resources below them. On the surface of Earth, children from dozens of different species played together in parks that existed in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, former enemies worked side by side on projects that would have been impossible for any single civilization to complete. The greatest minds from every corner of the galaxy collaborated on solving problems that had seemed insurmountable for millennia. The transformation had not been limited to Earth itself. Throughout The galaxy ancient conflicts had simply ended when the tools of war became useless. The Vorthan Collective, once feared for their ability to drain heat from entire star systems, now used their powers to create perfect climates on worlds that had been too hot or too cold to support life. The Corvani Republic had become the most effective peacekeeping force in known space, using their military skills and discipline to protect innocent beings instead of conquering them. The Nexus Empire had completely disbanded their massive war fleets and transformed into an organization dedicated to exploring unknown regions of space. How did you know? Tejo asked the question that had been bothering him for months. How did your people know that isolation would make you stronger instead of weaker? Dr. Hyjin smiled, and her expression carried the weight of 250 years of human struggle and determination. We did not know, she admitted honestly. We just understood that we could not continue doing what we had always done. When the galaxy forgot about us, we faced a simple choice. We could disappear entirely, or we could become something worth remembering. On the planet's surface below them, representatives from every major civilization were working together on projects that would have seemed like fantasy only a year before, terraforming technology that could transform dead worlds into gardens in a matter of months, medical advances that could cure diseases that had plagued entire species for thousands of years, energy systems that could power entire civilizations without depleting natural resources or causing environmental damage, transportation networks that could move people and goods across the galaxy instantly without the need for traditional spacecraft. All of this was possible now because different species were sharing their knowledge instead of hoarding it. What happens next? Tejo asked, looking out at the bustling activity that surrounded Earth. Now we grow together, Dr. Hyjin replied. The galaxy is vast, and there are still countless wonders waiting to be discovered. But we will not discover them as competitors or conquerors. We will explore them as partners working toward the benefit of everyone. As if to emphasize her words, a message arrived from the far rim of the galaxy, transmitted by a species that had never been contacted before. The Luminari had been monitoring the changes in galactic civilization from their hidden worlds and had decided that it was finally safe to reveal themselves. We have been watching from the shadows for over 1,000,000 years, their message said. We have been waiting for the galaxy to evolve beyond the primitive cycle of violence and domination. We are ready to join you in building something better. Admiral Yunji appeared on the main communication screen of the station to provide more details about this remarkable development. The Luminari are beings of pure energy who have been hiding in the galactic core since before most of our current civilizations even existed. They represent knowledge and wisdom that predates everything we thought we knew about the universe, and they are not the only ones, she continued. 17 other ancient species have been monitoring our progress, and they are all preparing to make contact. The galaxy is about to become far more interesting and wonderful than we ever imagined possible. As the months and years continued to pass, the story of Earth transformation became the foundation myth of an entirely new galactic civilization. Children throughout the galaxy learned about the humans who had chosen evolution over extinction, who had proven that any species could transcend its limitations if it had the courage to embrace change. Schools on every world taught the fundamental lesson that humanity had demonstrated that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to create and nurture. Educational programs emphasized cooperation over competition, understanding over fear, growth over stagnation. The galaxy had finally learned the most important truth of all, that the universe was vast enough for everyone to thrive without taking anything away from others, and at the center of this new golden age, Earth continued its eternal rotation, no longer silent, no longer forgotten, but shining like a beacon of hope and possibility in the infinite darkness of space. The age of conquest and domination was finally over. The age of cooperation and mutual advancement had begun, and everything in the galaxy had changed forever in ways that would benefit countless generations yet to come. The humans had kept their promise. They had taught the galaxy a better way to live, and that lesson would echo through eternity.